Hello, and welcome to another episode of Loremaker's Guide to the Galaxy, where we highlight one of the many star systems in the Starcitizen universe and give you some background on the system itself, as well as some insight behind some of the creative choices that we were making when we were coming up with them. I'm Dave Haddock. I'm lead writer over here at Cloud Imperium Games, and today we are going to talk about the Tyrol system. Interestingly enough, this is actually one of my favorite systems in the game, and is actually a great example of sort of the awesome kind of creative symbiosis that can arise between the various departments in the game. I'll get to that in a second, but yeah, this is actually a really fun, kind of cool criminal system. So anyway, we are going to go to our handy star map. So right here, we're going to start on Earth. And we will show you where you can find Tyrol based on sort of its proximity to Earth. So we go out. So there is Sol system, and let me turn on the jump points. Okay. So scrolling back. I'll go to 2D to make it a little easier. So Sol system's over here. And Tyrol is all the way over here. So you can see it's sort of on the east. I mean, we sort of use, or I use these sort of east, west, north, south things. That's not actually obviously what these are, because as you can see, once you go into 3D, that all these things are sort of a very not linear, flat, plane thing. But it's just easier when you're looking kind of straight down on it to kind of guide you. So it's over here. Kind of over by, you got some Banu system down here. Kins is probably the closest to Banu space. You got one jump through Karen down there, and a couple jumps away from Indra, which is Xi'an over here. So yeah, so actually Tyrol system is actually was a stretch goal system from the 2012. Interestingly enough. So it has been around for a while. Little background about the system. It was discovered in 2823 via this jump point from Karen's system. And the explorer who discovered it was named Damon Huerta, who was a resident of actually Karen 3. I'll kind of jump in here just to go do a little fun. So here we have Karen 3. And so he was actually from here and lost his home and family during the Civil War, and the Civil War had actually resolved in a ceasefire, so it didn't technically end a few years earlier. But he was basically unwilling to leave the system that had been his family's home for generations, and it was the only one that he had known. But at the same time, he refused to go back to the planet that had basically kind of caused him so much suffering. So he basically had kind of spent a lot of his time living on the drift, spending equal time picking up odd jobs around the system and crashing at different stations and whatnot when he could afford it. And so the discovery of the jump point over to Tyrol kind of came at an opportune moment, because he had actually come dangerously close to being forced to sell his ship. So it worked out well for him. But unfortunately for the system, the UEE didn't end up claiming it, but let's head in and that will actually explain why. So, as you can see right off the bat, we have a binary star system, which is super cool. This is a white dwarf, and this, more importantly, is a main sequence star that has entered this sort of subgiant phase of its evolution. So basically, the system's about to blow up in a bad way. So needless to say, the UEE was not really enthusiastic about trying to colonize a system that could blow up at any time, so they basically kind of left it alone. And actually, interesting thing too, while I'm on it, is originally, if you go back, like the original write-up for the system was actually, it was a single star system. It was just a star that had entered the sort of red giant phase, but obviously the Nova thing was still kind of a key point to it, but it was just a single star. And when we circulated a lot of these systems out to our consultants who were sort of helping us with the kind of astrophysics, offering their insight and expertise into the science of stuff, Steve and one of them basically had tackled the system, changed it to a binary. So he added this sort of white dwarf companion to it, and to quote him, basically the main sequence star has just left the main sequence and is becoming a subgiant. It's now big enough so the outer layers are being sucked up by the white dwarf for the first time, and this will lead to a smaller explosion called a nova that will be destructive enough. This was actually an interesting point. It will be destructive enough to be a cataclysmic event in the entire system, but not significantly enough to affect neighboring systems. So he also went on to explain that basically like these novas could kind of happen several times, and the white dwarf could potentially ultimately go supernova, which would be bad for basically everyone. So yeah, fun times. But anyway, that was sort of the kernel of the idea of the station. It was this idea of a system sort of on the brink of destruction that was sort of the hook into the character of the system. And it was just an interesting idea to think about that, like, even though in the sort of timeline of cosmic and space events and stuff like that, it's obviously over hugely protracted amounts of time of hundreds of thousands and millions of years and stuff like that. But at a certain point, they have to, there has to be that moment of it doing something, that moment of change. So, so this was just this idea of having this really fragile system that, like, any day it could disappear, basically. So I don't know, it just seemed like it had a lot of potential to be, lead to some really interesting kind of storytelling and possibilities and characters and stuff like that, like who would move here, stuff like that. So anyway, getting on to sort of the makeup of the system itself, you have got 7 planets here, and I won't go into too much detail because I highly advise poking around in the star map itself and looking up the data and stuff like that. So I'll just kind of focus on more of the kind of the interesting ones. So, as I said earlier, while the UEE didn't necessarily claim Tyrol, it didn't mean that they weren't interested in it. The scientific community particularly was immediately entranced with this opportunity to set up research stations, data collectors, whatever, just to be able to study such a potentially massive event up close, and it just offered kind of potential breakthroughs in understanding how the universe works and stuff like that. And interestingly enough, it's sort of a counterbalance to other systems like Calus, which was the one, if you remember, is sort of in the process of forming. It's still that sort of forming the planets and all that stuff. So this is sort of the opposite, and they're equally fascinated with that. So this is the opposite end of the spectrum. So this is about the death of a system rather than the start of one. One of the closest, if you go over here to Tyrol 1, basically our first kind of habitat here is actually over on the moon called Lanisto. And it was basically set up by a research company to study, the event theoretically up close. So you can see proximity-wise here, it's a pretty good seat to check things out. Unfortunately for them, it didn't blow up quick enough for them, so they kind of ran out of funding, and they had to shut down the research station. So unfortunately, now it's basically a home to squatters, smugglers, refugees, and who have nicknamed the place Front Row to indicate basically the destruction of the system. So let me go back to the wide view. Okay, so that's Tyrol 1. But otherwise, the big draw here, which I cannot seem to find at the moment, there you are, is Tyrol 5, which is weirdly off-center from its orbital line. Anyway, so basically Tyrol 5 used to be an ice giant, was the thing, and but when the main sequence star entered into the subgiant phase, basically it sort of pushed out a lot of energy and heat and stuff like that. And so it basically kind of melted the planet and pushed it into its sort of, weirdly enough, it's kind of its green zone type thing. And so basically it's got the closest thing, even though the idea was originally that the life on the surface is very tricky, I think is a way to put it, but dangerous because the sun can be so overpowering. But this is where the closest thing to a settlement in the system can be found, and it's a place called Haven. Now, this is where we get back to that sort of the symbiosis I was talking about earlier, because this was the original write-up for Haven. Let me bring it up. Haven is built into the rock of a vast canyon in an effort to keep the temperature down. What started as a small network of tunnels expanded as more fugitives, criminals, expatriates, and outlaws decided to roll the dice and hide in a dying system. So that was it. That's 2 sentences in one kind of run-on sentence. But anyway, so basically just a city built in the canyons, shaded from the dangerous sunlight, sort of Adobe-style structures for outlaws to hide in until the system explodes. That's it. Very, very loose description, but it led to this concept art, which we will put up here, and which to me is, I remember when I saw this when it came out, when it was posted like a couple of years ago, it just totally knocked me out. Like it really captured this life and flavor and really kind of just a unique, immediately interesting place that I wanted to kind of go visit. Like it was amazing to me, and again, like this piece was done several years ago, so the details of it, like these sort of weird little structures and stuff like that, like they'll probably change when it's actually built, but it doesn't matter. It's like it's this vibe, the spirit of the thing, like that's what really kind of sells it and makes it really, really exciting. So yeah, it was and so consequently, once this image was done, it reinvigorated a lot of my personal interest in this thing, and so I started wanting to develop it more based off of this image. So it was sort of, we had that description. That description led to this picture. This picture led to more, specialized, tailored lore about it, because it was just such, you just want to be here and see what it was like and stuff like that. So yeah, again, it was pretty great, and it's again it sort of raised this question of, you have a vista like this with the persistent threat of that at any time this sort of massive cosmic event way beyond your control, something you can do nothing about, could theoretically happen and just wipe out all life in the system. Just led to this really interesting possibility of like the denizens who've chosen this place as their home. It's just really, really, really interesting. So, so that is, that's Tyrol in a nutshell. Again, personally, I'm really looking forward to the point where we're actually going to start building this system, because we have a lot of like kind of criminal, shady towns and stuff like that, and even kind of underground places. We have a handful of those types of places built in tunnels and stuff like that. Like I think that this place is really going to have like a very fun, kind of fatalistic, flavor to it, which I think will be really, really cool, and I'm really looking forward to getting into. So yeah, that'll do it for this episode of Loremakers. A big thank you, of course, to our subscribers who help us create additional content like this. And a bigger thank you, of course, to everyone out there in the community who helped make this game amazing. And again, if you'd like to learn more about the system or all of the other systems, you should definitely check out our star map, because it is super dope and filled with really, really cool little tidbits and stuff like that. And we also have, if you're interested in Tyrol specifically, we actually have a galactic guide too that sort of digs a little deeper into it, which we'll kind of link into the description to make it easier to find. But again, that's it. Thank you for all your support. I'm Dave Haddock, and I will see you in the verse, or probably get shot by you in Star Marine.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Starcitizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.